Welcome very, very much to Conversation. It's a pleasure for me to welcome to the program a dear friend of mine, and I think as we will see during the course of this program, which is being done at the tail end of the holiday season, you can see by our little Christmas tree here of the years 2013, 2014, on the side of the angels, as it were, and that being Lucy Law Webster. And we're going to be talking about her life. And Lucy, welcome so very, very much to Conversations. I'm really pleased to have you here to talk about things in a comprehensive way at this time.
Thank you.
Now, I asked you, maybe you could share with us, Lucy. You've been on the scene, as they say, in the places for peace and justice since everywhere, World Federalists and this sort of thing.
Right.
We've known each other over maybe 20 years or so, on and off and everything. But I wonder if you could, for me, Lucy, share your own personal background. I understand you were born in that lovely town of Ames, Iowa.
That's
and
right.
everything, but share your own background. And then let's talk about the human condition with particular emphasis upon the idea of federalism, but also on economic theorizing that informs the political process. But share your own background, please.
So I lived in Ames, Iowa for 2 months.
2 months. Oh, you got your whole early upbringing, yeah.
And then we drove across the country where my father was going to Harvard for a PhD in physics. And I've been on the East Coast a lot of the time subsequently. I grew up in Cambridge, Boston, and as a little tiny child, and then in New Jersey, and went to Princeton Day School and Wellesley College, and then I spent a year and a half literally traveling around the world and speaking for the World Federalists throughout the United States.
That's even when you were young, like 20 years old?
When I was 20, 21.
Yeah, right. 22. Well, what a wonderful thing to do. Could you tell a little about your mother? You talk about your father was a physicist. Yeah.
Well, my mother was a upward mobile housewife.
All right. Well, that's all right. Fine. And the family setting, was the family setting intellectually stimulating, warm and welcoming? Was it a place of encouraging intellectual activity and that sort of thing?
Well, pretty much. Yeah. But, you know, I mean,
like everywhere,
you could ask my father all sorts of questions, and my mother always knew all the kings of England and how to spell things.
Oh, wow.
Like that.
Okay.
But it wasn't a very intellectual house. My main intellectual formation came from the fact of the Second World War coming along when I was at a formative age, and my participation in things at the Second Presbyterian Church in Princeton, New Jersey. And
was your dad at Princeton, or
he was at the physics lab of RCA.
Oh, RCA, right.
It was right near the university.
Was that David Sarnoff?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. So he was a physicist.
Right. So, you know, so they were very highly educated, but not political and not particularly interested in anything like that. But through my church, I came to the view that people have the possibility and the responsibility to make the world what it ought to be.
Well, that seems to be the charge of the Gospels and so forth.
And that seemed very important during the war.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Because you could see the different options around and how much energy was going into stupid things like war.
I know it's been altogether too much part of the
And I also knew about the concentration camps and all that sort of thing when I was.
You knew about it at the time?
When I was 8 or so, because there were people at the Institute of Advanced Studies at Princeton who knew people who had just barely escaped the Nazis in Europe and so forth. So So I knew all these tensions, and I developed the idea to get rid of war. I mean, I was also very much into saving bugs and small animals.
Saving what?
Bugs. Rescuing spiders.
Mr. Wilson would take it, E.L. Wilson.
And I read book about Lamborghini and Schweitzer in Africa, and not hurting anything. I was interested in that too. But
Rachel Carlson or no?
No, that was later.
That was later. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But the main point is that with the war going on and all the horrors that one knew about, although they were fairly distant, I became very keen on the idea of getting rid of war. And also social justice.
Okay, they go together, don't they, I think?
My school was very much into...
That's Wellesley now you're talking
about? No, I'm talking about Princeton Day School.
Oh, okay.
Well, I went to the women's part. It was called, at that time, it's now called Princeton Day School.
Yeah, okay, right. Huh?
Yeah, but that time I was in the girls' part. We went to Quaker work camps and did useful things.
And when you say the church, what church were you aligned with?
This was the Second Presbyterian Church in Princeton.
Presbyterian, okay. Yeah.
But it just happened that the minister, Reverend Tucker, William L. Tucker, he believed that Christianity was and was intended to be a prescription for social justice.
Well, I think all of what they call the wisdom schools, the people, Jesus to Buddha to whoever has inspired the wisdom schools, have all cautioned or said one of the things to do is take care of the least among us.
Right.
And it's been roundly ignored, by and large, by the political class that relied upon the gun as the best way to try to establish and make solid their claim to political legitimacy, don't you, through history, if you look back.
Yeah, and I was totally against guns and war, guns and war and violence, all forms of violence, even stepping on bugs. And very much in favor of...
Did you read Thoreau?
Yes, right, I did quite a lot of Thoreau in those days, in Emerson,
Well, good for you. And then you did go on to Wellesley.
Wellesley, I went to Wellesley when I finished high school.
And what did you major?
I majored in political science and economics.
Political science and economics, two big subjects of the moment. Still. And then maybe that would be good. And then I understand that you were a peacenik.
Well, I was a World Federalist.
Talk about that.
Yeah, which is a bit different because particularly then, we were very adamant that you couldn't have comprehensive disarmament, which was one of the ideas right after the end of the war, without systems of verification and safety measures. And but when the UN Charter was signed in San Francisco, and it made the UN more like the League of Nations than people who'd been worrying about these things during the war had wanted. They wanted to have a more of a real world government. And because the League of Nations every country had a veto, the UN has 5 countries have a veto, which the people in San Francisco thought was necessary, but some of them thought that they would redo it in 10 years.
You mean maybe to get over the veto?
Yeah, to get rid of the veto.
More democratic in the general
Right,
assembly.
and in my opinion, you need to have more participation in the Security Council and also more empowerment of the General Assembly so that it will be taken seriously.
Did you cotton on to that when you were in college and so forth? Or you began to take up the
when I was in I think 10th grade, I and 2 other students set up a World Federalist chapter at my school.
Is there a proud tradition there, and who's it associated with back to the 18th, 19th, 20th centuries, other than our leaders of our spiritual traditions that have always counseled to take care of the living side rather than the killing side of the human endeavor?
I don't know, but we were quite influenced by Quakers at that time.
Quakers, yeah, they were.
And Bayard Ruskin, for example.
Yeah, I knew Bayard. I did a program with him way back.
I knew him.
Yeah.
And you know, that sort of general philosophy, which tied in with the religious lessons that one had picked up by
Do you
then.
count yourself a religious person? I don't mean to pry.
No, but I
You
believe
learn
in the
from
social
yeah.
teachings
Right.
of Christianity and Buddhism,
Okay.
and
fair.
mostly all the great religions.
Right. And give credence to that. Yeah,
Oh, of
right.
course.
Yeah.
Because they've said things that are valuable for humanity. But of course, as people have said, Christianity would be fine, but it hasn't been tried yet.
That's
So-
right. I think that was Mr. Gandhi. I think the word to that fact.
Yeah,
or
well,
Western civilization. would
Yeah,
be too bad.
when will that happen?
Yes,
Yeah,
right,
I would like to
yeah.
see Western civilization. I would like
Right,
to see it
right.
happen. Yes.
Okay, we're talking at a personal level and everything. Then, as I understand, in a brief conversation before the tape rolled, you became married with a
so
or maybe it's jumping ahead.
that was a bit later.
Yeah.
Not much, but
Yeah.
okay. As a student World Federalist
Yeah.
in my senior year at Wellesley, I was actually elected the chair of the U.S. Student World Federalists, and I was in correspondence with the person who ran the Student World Federalist office in Amsterdam for the whole world, and that was somebody named David Webster.
Mm-hmm.
So I sort of had an idea of David Webster from this correspondence, and we also had a photograph of him when he had been sort of like starving. They didn't have any money in the World Federalist Organization in those days, and he was living in Paris. So there was a photograph of him in a bathtub, which we used to show how skinny he was. He was actually someone who was very inclined to be rather overweight. But at that particular point, because of lack of food and so forth, he was rather slim. And we used that as a fundraising device for the students in New England. We had a New England College Council of World Federalists in about 6 different colleges.
And the World Federalist is a proud tradition. What are the roots of that institutionally and so forth? I'm just not.
Well, it just grew up. I mean, somebody named Harris Wofford, who was a high school student in Scarsdale, started the Student World Federalists in about 1945 or 44,
Which
probably.
is the conclusion of the war,
As the war was drawing to a close. And then in 47, there was a conference in Asheville, North Carolina, where all the different groups, including the Student Federalists and 3 or 4 other equally large groups that were interested in World Federation, got together and formed the United World Federalists.
I see, okay. And I mean, there's a term, I think it's a proud term, some people think with derision, a peacenik, but also a peacenik that had basis in terms of the realities by which that might be achieved.
Yeah, well, this is what most World Federalists thought, that just working for peace was kind of wishy-washy, but that we were for the structures of a peaceful world. Like you don't have, you need to have a cop on the corner was one of our pamphlets. You need to have a system for law and order. So big supporters of international law. I studied international law quite a lot.
You did, okay, and then okay, this is going. And you're also an economist.
Or
interested in political economy and so forth.
So I got into that mostly a bit later, but I think social justice really depends on having a Keynesian approach of having people. Well, as Henry Ford put it, he wanted his workers to have enough money to buy the cars they were making. So it's essential to have an economy work, to have people be paid adequately so that they can buy things, to produce things. So that one of my sons is a restaurateur. He owns 3 restaurants in the Cooperstown area, upstate New York. And it's quite clear that people only come in if they have money.
Well, he said that he paid $5 a day. I was brought up in Detroit, and our family used to be on 16th Street. Mr. Ford, when he was about 8 or 9 years old, used to tinker in their garage
Yeah.
before he went on to build a great industrial thing,
Right.
Rouge and all that.
But he realized that you had to have people be paid enough to buy their own produce.
That might apply to some of the discussion in the news now about getting the minimum wage up
Absolutely,
in order to get more
absolutely.
demand, effective demand, not just
yeah,
demand. The
right.
demand is there
Yeah,
for food
yeah,
and
because
things.
people
but-
have to eat.
Yeah,
but,
right, and that's a big question that Keynes did try to address in the
Yeah.
Great Depression. Were you mindful of the Bretton Woods and what happened
Yeah.
in there and the institutional structure? That
Yeah.
seems to me was largely informed by Keynes.
Yes,
He was the
yes,
giant of the
yes.
time. Lord John Maynard Keynes was
Right,
the giant.
right.
And you did study him, or
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you seem to, as they say, cotton on to his way of thinking that holds with you now in the adult part of your life. And
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Okay, you're a
I
Keynes-
mean, I
would
think
you
it's-
count yourself a Keynesian?
Yes.
Okay, fair
Yes.
enough. Okay,
Yeah,
say it proudly.
I think,
Yeah.
you know, the idea that people can be unemployed and shouldn't receive compensation for the unemployment insurance that they've already invested in is absolutely terrible, not only for those people, but also for the economy, because it means that they can't buy anything.
Yeah,
And so my son's restaurants don't get customers.
yeah, right. You got to have people with that to go. And so you got actively engaged. And you've been engaged all your life. You've been on the scene, as it were.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
these circles of.
Yeah. So getting back to my
Yes, please.
relationship with David Webster.
Yes.
So I wrote to him a lot when I was a senior at Wellesley, and then I was actually invited to come and work there to sort of take over his job, but. And when
You
he
were
wa-
really involved. You were.
well, when
active,
he
yeah.
was there, they had very little money. He
Yeah.
and a Dutch sociologist named Adrian Huttenpieper.
That's
They
great.
would have to decide whether to put stamps on the envelopes or buy a meal. But you know, it was really bad. But then, by the time I graduated from Wellesley, someone named Dean Paul Shipman Andrews, who was a professor at Syracuse University, his son, who had been studying law, had a Fulbright scholarship to study law at the University of Amsterdam, and he was elected the president of the World Student Federalists.
I see.
So he was working studying in Amsterdam, and he gave about half of his Fulbright to the office of the Student Federalists.
Right.
So suddenly
So there was
the money.
legacy money.
So I was offered a job which was paid much better than David had ever been paid, $100 a month.
Yeah,
but
right.
my parents,
Huge money in those days. Yeah.
Well,
it had real buying power.
in Amsterdam, it was
Yeah.
it would have been enough. But my parents didn't really approve of that wage level. So
because they thought it was high.
they thought it was low. They thought it
Low.
was too low.
Oh.
So I just was involved in negotiating to get someone else to come and take that job, but I held it whilst we were, sort of sorting it out, how to
You
do
said it
it.
was $100 a week?
No, a month.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
in Europe they always say give the monthly pay.
it's
So
amazing how the money goes. It used to be. I mean, how they measure the poverty level and everything, it's just gone up and up and up.
yeah,
The
well,
inflation
$100 a month wasn't really very much, but it
No,
was
no,
okay for an
yeah.
NGO.
Yeah, okay, yeah, right,
you know,
right.
so,
Or
I mean,
a struggling artist or something. It'd be nice if-
and so
Yeah.
we actually managed to get 2 Americans to come because Sean Reardon was working on a PhD thesis, and his wife was a very suitable person to run the Student World Federalist office. And we also had actually a cousin of Bill Andrews who happened to be living in the Netherlands.
Okay.
She came and helped out, and there were all sorts of and local people and so forth. So it was interesting. But in those days, of course, you obviously didn't have the internet. You didn't have hardly anything. And it was only about 10 years later when the European Union started having funds for student conferences.
Conferences, yeah, right.
That you had a sort of community of people who could work together.
Yeah.
Whereas in 1953-54, that sort of period, it was rather difficult communicating effectively because you had to be writing letters. But when I was in Amsterdam, I was in Amsterdam for about 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, and then Bill Andrews and I went up to Copenhagen, where there was an enormous World Federalist Conference
Really?
in the Christiansborg Castle, which is the Danish Parliament building.
I see.
It's
Uh-huh.
an amazing building. For one thing, the elevators always are going up and down. They don't stop. So you.
Oh yeah, I've seen those. I remember
yeah,
those from
yeah,
when I was
yeah.
over in Europe. Yeah.
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 So it was, and that was about 300 people there at the conference, including about 70 members of parliament from different countries and about 70 young people in the Student Federalists, and then the others were, sort of ordinary people.
Yeah, it was good to have the Scandinavian part of the world represented, because they have some people, in the minds of many, they have some of the most advanced systems. In
I think
of
so.
justice.
I
There
think,
is
I think
Sweden,
so.
Finland, Norway,
Right.
Denmark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
anyway, back to the economics and so forth. That's important because it informs.
and at
Okay,
that conference in Copenhagen, whereas originally the World Federalists had only been talking about security and peace and making the charter be a disarmament document in the future, getting rid of the nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
But at that conference, Paul Shipman Andrews, the same gentleman, he brought forward an idea for a sort of a trade-off system where the Western richer countries, industrialized countries, would get peace and security, and we would offer to the less developed countries the opportunity for development. And so it would be a balanced quid pro quo sort of program.
It must have been a little bit discouraging to see the incredible, in the heat of the Cold War, the proliferation of atomic weapons and delivery
so that sort of put a.
It must have been a little hard to
that very
fight
much
against.
hurt the World Federalist movement.
I would think, yeah.
When the Soviet Union walked into Czechoslovakia and sort of took over Eastern
56,
Europe
57,
and
the
40, and then in 48, so there was the Warsaw Pact was created and NATO was created, and the Cold War set in, and that really could put a damper on our hopes for
peace,
for revising the UN Charter in 1955, which was the original goal, because people said, "Oh, this business of the veto, that's hurts things. We have to get rid of the veto."
Right.
But we couldn't do it because there was no communication, really.
Steve, keep fighting against the tide. You remember 82 here in New York, where they had the march in.
Oh, I was there. I was there.
That was amazing. We had over
2
a million
million,
people. Every avenue and every street was just jam-packed with people.
Right.
It was encouraging. That was Mr. Reagan.
Yeah, I was writing for the NGO newspaper called Disarmament Times.
Okay.
And I wrote up that conference, that march. And
you were
everything.
there.
Yeah, I was
you were
there.
in the park.
Yeah, I was in the park.
That was really an event. That was amazing, but it must have been discouraging in a certain sense after the Second War, to think that there was such a, and that informed a whole political dialogue, did it not? The war.
Yeah.
It seems to me George Kennan and the X article and the containment.
Yeah, I
and
mean,
the
that was
thinking.
better than more war, but it still wasn't really peace.
Yeah, right. And then it came down. Well, we kind of skipped that thing about around 1970 or so, around the Vietnam business. You must have been involved, or were you involved actively?
I was
in
opposed to
opposition
the Vietnam War, yes, that's for sure. But I was living in England by that time. So getting back to my personal trajectory.
All right, fine.
So I was working in Amsterdam and went to this conference in Copenhagen and so forth. And then in December I came back to the United States and Christmas with my family, etc. And then I had the opportunity to go to something called the World Assembly of Youth, which was in Singapore in 1954.
54.
Sorry, where are we? Yeah, because it was 53. I graduated from Wellesley in 53.
Yeah, 54. Okay.
So
yeah.
1954.
Right.
There that made it sort of interesting.
Yeah.
Although he didn't have any influence on us.
Okay. You know.
And actually, the World Assembly of Youth was probably financed by the State Department, by the CIA, because the idea was to have young people. There were about 10 from each of 40, 50 countries who were there in Singapore. And I was on the U.S. delegation, but I was also representing the World Federalists. And in order to get enough money to do everything I wanted to do, I wrote to all the World Federalist chapters around the United States, and they each sent me 50 of them sent me $35 in advance to go around the world and come speak in their town.
Oh, that was good. That's a good idea.
The women voters and various
And
groups.
the message is consistently put down your weapons and let's live peace.
No, the message is to
okay, sorry.
build a world federation.
Build a world federation.
So that issues of war and peace, which are inherently above the nation, you know, one country can't decide on peace. You have to have more. You have to have a general agreement, so that issues like war and peace could be dealt with in a governmental way, as if the UN were a federal world government.
You supported the UN from the beginning?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to strengthen it.
Yeah, to strengthen it, yeah.
To make it, to get rid of the veto, to make it more capable of doing what needs to be done. For example, now we definitely need a professional UN peace force, peacekeeping force. The mess in Africa, where I mean, the African Union and other and various countries do send troops, and they can try to deal with insurgents and warlike situations, but not very well. So the World Federalists always have wanted to have a directly recruited UN forces where the people are so good, so professional, so good both as soldiers but mostly as peacekeepers and as peace builders. By they can do development work and such. So that was one of the things we wanted right from the beginning. We still are still working on that.
Yeah, still working on getting it right.
Because having the contingency forces, which is what we have now in the UN, where if the Secretary General wants to have a force go to, if the Security Council decides you should do something about Mali, then these forces have to be assembled from the contingencies that are put forward, that are put on hold by different member states. But if you had a UN directly recruited force right there, ready to go, that would be better.
It's amazing how many people just despise the UN, the whole idea. They got their notions of sovereignty and patriotism and all
and so
unified institutional thinking.
So you see, it seems clear to me that patriotism is something that you should be proud to contribute to the whole world. You should be proud to be helpful with development projects and stuff for the whole world.
It's usually ginned up to protect to protect the interests and the
well, this is what's
one
wrong.
nation against another.
Yeah,
or one company against
the
another.
ethics. The ethics of that is totally against what I believe.
Right. Well, you've got a lot of that. It seems to me, Lucy, if you go that I did geography and so forth and all that, but I did a lot of geopolitics, and so it seems to me that throughout the whole, ever since the Neolithic Revolution or something, we don't know what it was like when we were wandering around in the wilderness and so forth very well, but then, you know, after Neolithic, Egypt, and it's always been, it seems to me they had
dog eat dog.
Well, dog eat dog in a way, but the basic thing is, you get civilization, and then there's a need for, you got surplus for food, you don't have to be, and all that. And then you build what they call civilization. I think it means city dwelling. But it's always been a small group of people run everything. Everyone else is more or less wallowing around in the mud doing what they're told. You
Yeah.
had pharaohs and you had Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah.
Then you get
But this isn't what the Buddhists advocate. This isn't what my Presbyterian minister advocated. This isn't what I believe.
Well, the wisdom schools go contrary to the reality. And then you get down to where it gets down, 1,000 years after Rome, you had kings, for crying out loud.
Yeah,
Political legitimacy.
But once you have the model of democracy, which you had pretty soon after kings, that was better.
Well, it was about 1,000 years after Rome that you had hereditary states. They still worship Queen Elizabeth in England.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter because she doesn't have any power. It's just a symbol.
But they did, and they had it, and they backed up that power. And it's still the case. And the thing essentially that was asserted in order to be what they call, political scientists like to be not idealistic or anything, they want to be
realpolitik.
Deal with, and if you pronounce
but
it,
that all that means is that you look at power as being something that's balanced against, and that's what George Kennan did, of course, which was better than war.
Right.
But it wasn't really.
But it also informed the internal organization of a society too, and the basic premise was whoever's got the club can rule.
Yeah, but that's wrong.
I just looked up in the encyclopedia, my mind goes all over the place and everything, the right of conquest. That's one of the first laws of international law. You have to have the right to conquest granted. So if you conquer somebody, they're conquered, and that's it. And that's one part of international law. And it's the
Article 51 in the UN Charter allows military action by a member state if it is in danger of being conquered, if it is in danger of being subjugated by other countries.
Yeah, they're countervailing things to try to assert, but over the long haul, the source of political power has been a big club.
Yeah, well, this is so primitive, but we can change it.
Primitive.
We do not need to be primitive.
But, okay, but that is...
We need to appreciate each other. Oh, by the way, I want to show you a book here. This is being promoted by the UN mission of...
this is the happiness report.
Yeah, the happiness report.
Is that fellow up at Columbia now is involved in this all?
Is Jeffrey Sachs involved in this?
He did the structural adjustment in Russia. This is a book, New Economic Paradigm.
His proposals for Russia right after perestroika were not very good in my opinion, but I think that Jeffrey Sachs is absolutely genius now. He's working on this is a minor thing for him, but this is several UN member states are pushing this. But it just shows that we can rise above this primitive competitiveness.
Well, okay,
we could. We haven't done it yet.
We haven't.
But Jeffrey Sachs has lots and lots of projects for. I don't know if this has anything to do with him, but say peace and conflict studies. There's so many value. This is what I meant to pull out.
Okay.
This solutions for sustainable agriculture and food.
Is this UN or no?
Yeah, probably.
Well, let's show it. Yeah, okay. That's another thing that we can show.
Food systems.
And these are helpful signs.
Yeah, so there are just so many programs which could be adequate, which could do away with children dying of malaria and starvation and all sorts of. I worked for UNICEF briefly at one point, and there's just so many things that can be done.
Right.
And Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is very good at sort of mobilizing what power there is and mobilizing civil society groups all over the world.
I guess there's been these kind of people all through history, haven't there, who were saying, let's take care of everybody.
Yeah, but now it's possible. Now it's really can be done.
Okay.
And the alternative is so much worse now than it was before.
Talk to it. Talk to the reality.
Before the atomic bomb, nuclear weapons, etc., and also before climate change threats.
That's
of
another thing
rising seawaters.
But talk about the weapons and the realpolitik, and whoever's got the gun wins, and the right.
Well, you can't win. You can't win with nuclear weapons. I mean, even Iran.
You can intimidate with nuclear weapons. We intimidate the world. We have the
That's
United
why.
States
That's
has
why
it.
Iran thinks it needs some,
Well,
because
all right, but
the
the
United
point-
States has
But
a
that's
thousand, and Russia has 1,000.
It used to be a siege machine advantage, or a bow and arrow, or something. Anything that gave a
But you see, it
military
used
advantage.
to be that you could drive a gunboat up the river
Yeah.
and conquer a less developed country. You can't do that with nuclear weapons. They're totally useless. Generals and admirals have all recognized that they're useless.
Well,
They're just hold on to them in order to say we've got them, and the Russians are doing the same
Well,
thing.
I
But
thi-
it's
do you
really,
think- do you
really
think-
creating a risk
I
for the
love
whole
you,
world.
darling, and I love what you're thinking and everything, but don't you think at a certain level you're a subject in the minds of some, let's say, to being just naive? That what matters is who's got the muscle and the power.
To destroy the world.
That's one thing that you can have.
But I'm not in favor of
you
destroying
don't
the
like
world.
the idea of real politics or of the
I think
reality of power.
it's childish.
Okay.
It's 3-year-olds. 3-year-olds behave in that
Okay,
way, and
yes.
so do nation states
Okay, well,
on
that's
the
a
whole.
critique you take of it, but it is part of the political science and the way of
of
understanding
course it is.
political reality rather
Yeah.
than what we would like it to be.
No, political reality is a rich collection of facts, including the ones in this development program.
Yeah,
But
okay.
the childish behavior that 3-year-olds indulge in, and which nation states do when they're competitive, is recognized as realpolitik. That's true.
That is what is the political scientists will say, that's real. That's what you have to deal with, not with the idealized.
Well, you have to change it. You have to change
Okay,
it.
yeah, I understand that.
You have to do what needs to be done to avoid destroying the world. And one thing, for example, we could take all these warheads. The United States has like 1,000 nuclear weapons.
Many more.
All targeted at. We used to have more.
Yeah, we had
they've been
tens of
They've been
thousands,
reduced now. The United States has about 1,000, and Russia has about 1,000, and the rest of the world has, I don't know, about 500 altogether.
Well, have we successfully
But they're triggered. They're on trigger alert, and they're pointed at targets in Russia and places, and Russia has weapons presumably pointed at us.
Right.
So this is a fact. This is realpolitik. Great, great, great.
Well,
Just
do
what
you
we
think
want.
we've successfully run the arms race backwards to where we're away from the precipice? There was a time when we might have done in the world.
No, it's true.
The weapons get more and more effective and more lethal.
We can still
all
do
the
that.
time.
We can still do that. They're still sitting there, pointed at each other.
Yeah, and the growth of the military is huge. And the military...
And the idea that you can change Iraq or Afghanistan militarily, well, no one's tried to invade Iran yet.
Not yet, but Mr. Netanyahu's threatening.
Yeah, but that would be so stupid. That would be so stupid.
Well, you say it's stupid, but it's the basis of what informs that nation.
It would blow up the whole Middle East.
Yeah. Oh, it would do more than that. Well, let's ask a basic premise or a basic thought on your part. You're very. I bow down to your, your peaceful inclination and everything. Do you think that if there is in physics, there is in nature, there is in the structure of the universe and in the human condition, two things. There's one is a capability, and there is the side of the reality. There's a capability, okay? Do you think that the capability of the extension of consciousness unique to humanity, it seems, in a unique way, beyond just self-reflective consciousness of asking the larger issues up the hominoid line, that the extension of that through tools and technology and making the world different in the design sense to what you came into, all the resources were here to the caveman coming out of the cave, all the oil, everything was here. They had to lay us on with being able to utilize it. do you think the weapon systems that have developed, first you had the Gatling gun, that gave advantage to the British, and the weapon systems have become, if they were to be the capability exists, and it could be modeled, it is, that if there was a spasm of hatred that has been demonstrated throughout all of human history, one tribe against another, they go back thousands of years and so forth, if they were to be unleashed in a spasm of irrational hatred, the weapons that exist are inherent. If they were unleashed, that it is possible that that would mean the end of every single human being on the planet?
Yes.
You think that is the case?
It
you
is
have
possible.
modeling to that effect.
Yes, there has been modeling done.
Could you send me some of those? I would like to have them up on the wall.
Okay, I'll try to find something like that. But I'm
Now,
sure that one knows that all the atomic nuclear weapons were used.
Let me hold the question. Do you think that was the case at the time of the First World War?
No.
Okay, do you think it was the case at the time of the Second World War?
In 1946 it was the case. Once one had atomic weapons.
No, it wasn't.
Well, they had to, there were more built in the next 5-10 years by the United States and the Soviet Union.
From modeling that I see, even in 62, in 62, Lucy, when they had the thing, we came within a hair's breadth without Khrushchev.
We could have destroyed the world.
No, we could have destroyed civilization, but not the species. And most of the modeling I see, we reached that point, not at some vague thing, but it was the result of a process that is that it was about, even in 62, there would have been a few scraggling survivors of the unleashing of the weapons.
Oh, yeah, well, I don't know that one would ever get rid of absolutely every single human being.
Well, that's the question I was asking. That's the question I was asking.
To me, there's not much difference between having 0 human beings and having 10 who are dying.
No, there is a difference. Well, no, if they were dying out endlessly, if the thing was one that would wipe them out. Not all in one fell swoop, but you stop evolution.
Yeah,
the ability.
I
don't know. Had that capability ever in history until now.
I'll try and find some data on precisely whether it would really depend on whether the last 100 or 10 people had the capacity to continue living because they hadn't been so poisoned, fatally poisoned by the strontium-90 and all that sort of stuff. And also you have to take account of the risk of nuclear winter.
Yes.
That's what killed off the dinosaurs.
Well, it was
probably
from the asteroid.
Yeah.
65
right.
Million,
well, a man-made asteroid effect of building clouds that would prevent growth of any plants for 10 years or so.
But if you're talking about the end of the species.
Would be the end of the species.
99
nuclear winter could easily produce the end of the species.
Okay, that's interesting. Nuclear winter could, and some people are thinking, but 99.9% of all species that have ever existed, has gone extinct.
Right. Well, so we can do another one.
Maybe on the ability at our own hand, able to go extinct in universe. That's the point.
I'm not sure there's any absolutely conclusive data on that, but certainly there's a high probability that we can kill ourselves off.
Okay, and we certainly know it wasn't as recently as 1900 or something.
Certainly not then. And I take the point that in 1962.
What I'm trying to get at, Lucy, is with you Federalist and all that, this is not your normal time frame in terms of history.
Correct.
This is a unique moment when you and I and the young people coming up live, and that ought to inform at some level policy
it ought to.
Decisions.
Right.
But
that's why lots of young people are very concerned, particularly about global warming and the rising of the sea level.
That may be encouraging.
And the people who live on these islands that are about to disappear are very worried.
That would worry you indeed, but that's something to be alive at a time of day. People would probably have thought that throughout history. These are amazing times. Look at the mastodons, they're really big. Or 100, 200 years ago, it'd take 10,000, it'd take years and years to invent a tack. Now, in every discipline is coming over the horizon, every day, breakthroughs, systematic, earth-shattering breakthroughs in every, like a quickening. Did you ever bear children?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a thing with the women know more about that, but there's what they call a quickening at the end. It's 9 months. It's not 10 months. It's not 6 months.
Right.
It is a certain process involved,
Right.
and there's a quickening, and we're coming to a quickening to an era of crucialness that is unique to this moment. It seems not to come up. The news just keeps coming and everything, and the institutions are all in place, reified within a condition that is being qualitatively transformed at the level of capability. The negative side is we can stop evolution along the hominoid line, and that is very likely the case, particularly if we lingered out over a while. Mm-hmm. And on the other side, we may have, as a lot of people are suggesting, in a material sense, being realistic, we may have in our capability transcended material scarcity.
Yeah, of course
for
we have.
all the population of the world.
We definitely have.
You're saying we have. When did we cross that line where we had that? We didn't have that capability in 1900, did we?
No.
Okay. Did we have a corresponding living rate, like Booker Fuller would talk about, capability evolving, comparable to the killing rate of being able to stop evolution on the living rate side, that makes for an altered reality against which policy decisions and design can be put up on the table, perhaps?
Yeah, I think
that's
so.
what I'm trying to get at, to maybe underscore your federalist credentials.
Yeah, well, that's what World Federalists believe, and there's a lot of evidence that the world can be destroyed, or humanity can be destroyed.
But then it can be liberated.
And alternatively, we can be liberated.
Yeah.
That there's enough for everyone.
Now, do you realize what a huge statement that there never has been? That's the point you have to get across.
Right.
You couldn't have done that in 1920.
No.
You had no streptokinase. You didn't have penicillin. You didn't have any of these things.
That's right.
Do you understand what I'm trying to get at?
Yeah, it is a huge thing. It is a unique moment.
Now, how about the economics that is joined at the hip with all the politics, is it not?
Yeah, well...
Do we have an economic understanding or a basis of economic theorizing about how we're going to form capital, how we're going to distribute demand and buying power, or do we have a dilemma because we have outdated the architecture, the thought patterns, the educational patterns?
I think basically we have an outdated educational pattern, outdated understanding of what we're doing, but there are things that can be done, and I think a few people could define, there are people who could define this, but whether they could get consensus widely enough to make it work is another question.
But what we're trying to do is get something that would be at the level of design. Did you ever cotton on to Mr. Fuller and some of the systems thinkers and so forth, or the cyberneticists and so forth?
Sure.
And does that inform the economics discipline?
Yeah.
Or is the economics discipline still basically rooted that there's labor and there's capital and everybody's got to have a job and
that's
work?
Simplistic, and it needs to be remodeled.
I'm trying to get down to patterns without going into the details.
Yeah.
Because there's endless details you can go in. There's a big pattern, and it seems to me we need a new economic understanding.
I agree with you, and I don't think there is one that's been clearly
Should we be moving
defined, and that's what Jeffrey
Jeffrey
Sachs, for example,
You
is
like Jeffrey
working
Sachs?
on. Yeah.
I don't think he did a very good job in Russia.
No, everyone agrees with that, including him. He believes that too.
Well, all right, but he was going along on a theory. I don't know if he was channeling Keynes or what. We got Keynes, we got Schumpeter, we got Van Eyck, we got the left, the right,
he
and all
just
that.
thought if you do it quickly, the transformation will work better in Russia.
Well,
that was wrong. At least it didn't work.
It was market fundamentalism rearing its head, it seems to me.
But he has a wide range of approaches now, and
but there's is there in the horizon anything that can begin to deal with a world that has as a not some nice little thought or something you could talk about on a Sunday afternoon or something, but policy decision making based upon an understanding of a sufficiency. There is enough. Do you ever hear that, Sid, in political circles?
Sure.
It's all a matter of who can get It's all zero sum. It's all zero sum thinking practically at the leadership.
That just shows how primitive people are.
How primitive the system is.
How primitive political scientists often are.
And it's sorry, you got to get it.
I have to tickle in my throat. But it's not necessary. I mean, everyone, there are plenty of people who know how to rise above those sort of
individually, but not at policy level.
The zero sum thing is not well
But it has
respected.
been. For all of human
was.
history, it has.
It was.
When
but
did
it
that
isn't.
change? We went through the thing with the weapons. When did that situation ontologically alter?
Well, it changed about 10 or 20 years ago.
About 1970. About the same time the
yeah.
weapons became species
Yeah, I
lethal.
think so, but I'm not saying
don't
that
want you to
everyone
cough.
recognizes it.
I don't want you to choke on your cough drop, darling.
I don't think everyone recognizes it. That's the point you're making. The fact that you don't have to look at things in a zero-sum way.
But you've had to. History is a nightmare of injustice, said James Joyce had Daedalus say. It's a nightmare.
It was. It didn't have to be.
Oh, you think?
Buddha knew different ways
Well,
to do
that's true.
things.
The Eastern school.
Lots of people have known different ways to do things. But they didn't have.
They didn't have the
dominance.
They didn't have the infrastructure to make it possible.
No, that's not
It had
true.
to be a future
No,
thing.
no.
Prophetic.
If you have agriculture in go local, think global, go local.
Yeah.
Well, acting local gives everyone, empowers everyone to A, have a job, sowing rice, B, have food. I mean, what else do you want? I mean, it's this pride and this silly 3-year-old competition stuff.
What they call it, 3-year-old. I happen to really love 3-year-olds, and I think 5-year-olds are my favorite people. They are just totally they're just totally honest.
Yeah.
They're gorgeous.
Yeah.
And then they grow up and end up like us through all the conditioning that we put down upon them and so forth. But anyway, that's something that
But the dog-eat-dog thing is...
the dog-eat-dog still reigns. Look at that. We got the Trident submarines. We've got all this. We got bases in every world country.
You know why we have all these things?
Because we don't have a vision of being able to do things without the military might and the male.
And because we want the jobs in
maybe it's wrong.
different constituencies around the country. Members of Congress get lobbied to build bases in the
That's
constituency.
right. Well,
X or
what's
Y.
the difference? What's the difference between the legions of Rome and you've got a few people who run everything? They buy off the politicians. They have a concentration of power, and they're the leaders, and everybody else are like serfs on a feudal estate. The productive capability is increasingly technologically oriented, and the people as serfs are not needed. They're not needed. Let's do away with people. They're not needed as slaves on a feudal estate.
People have their own raison d'etre. Can become and be whatever they need to be. They can be artists and not. They can just grow one little patch of sweet potatoes, but they do not have to feed into this mega competition system.
You'll starve.
Yeah, no,
You'll
they
starve
won't.
in the street. There's no place for artists or anybody of any worth.
Anyone who can grow sweet potatoes won't starve.
That's true. There are sweet potatoes. You're right. I'm just overdoing it. The thing that it just seems to me there should be things up on the table, and I'm not at all sure Mr. Keynes, with all this creating demand and job, and the Employment Act of 1946, that's the golden rule. You have to get high-paying, middle-class jobs for everybody.
Well, that's the paradigm we're in now, but it's not the only paradigm.
Or the paradigm that we're stuck in. The idea that the only way for buying power to be got into the hands of the serfs the people is for them to have a job on the estate where the assets that are producing all the wealth, increasingly with robotization, are owned by a tiny plutocratic class,
and
like a king in the castle.
that's part of the paradigm which you and I think we can get rid of.
Well, I don't know if we can or not.
Well,
but
we
I mean,
could.
that's the reality.
Those are just facts, real facts.
Yeah, but it's the...
You're so impressed by facts.
Well, I don't know.
I'm impressed by realities of potentials.
Okay, well, that I would love to talk about that, because what I'm talking about is the potential. And
the potential is that people can own the means of production. They can own their own little patch of sweet potatoes.
Well, that patch of sweet potatoes doesn't relate to the way capital is formed and the way the modern economy is going with supply chains.
You can have different parallel forms of production. You don't have to, just because you have cell phones and things, it doesn't mean you can't also have sweet potatoes.
That's open source, but Marx said from each according to their ability, each according to their need. That's nice. We could probably meet the need. I mean, after all, Mr. Oliver didn't need anything but a little bowl of gruel. You can survive on a bowl of gruel. Let's let him have a bowl of gruel. All the assets will be owned here. They won't have any buying power. Let them eat gruel.
No.
It should be from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs and reasonable wants.
Right.
People want a television set. They want an automobile. They want comfort. They want travel. They want education. They want all kinds of things that are reasonable.
I mean, people
and are
want
available
dignity.
now the way it never has been.
Absolutely.
We can't be a prisoner of history.
No.
We've come to a, that's the point. We've come to a point, and it's never brought up on the table of policy decision making that how are we going to set up the economy? We don't have anything other than a thing that concentrates all the wealth and ownership in the hands of a plutocratic class.
People can just do what needs to be done.
Well,
you can also instruct governments to help.
well, that's true. Well, entirely.
Not our government, but
You've been trying to do that. I'm sorry I get off on a rant, but I'm just impressed with the uniqueness of the time in which you live.
it is amazing.
I mean,
it's quite amazing.
Yeah, it is to be. You think you could have lived in the 6th century, and I mean, it just goes on, and and it's just.
No, there weren't many options then, but then on the other hand, you weren't at risk of destroying the world.
That's right, but we have the ability to annihilate or liberate
Correct.
the Homo sapiens species within an ecological context.
Right.
Which do you think would be the better choice? Shall we annihilate or shall we liberate the human society?
Liberate.
I'm for liberation too, and I know you have been over a rich career. And I really thank you for all that good work and all the Federalists and that and things that are being done to work within the paradigm. But it's something new has got to be up on the table, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, well, we're building new paradigms. We're building new paradigms.
Well, you're helping to do that. And your pleasure to have had the perceptions of an angel of the human guardian of the human condition, that being Lucy Law Webster. And she's you can see, a Federalist and a fighter for the good and just system that we all deserve and ought to have. And thank you for all the good work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, well, we invite you to tune in. I guess we got a couple seconds left. We're tuning in. We're coming back again tomorrow in Conversations. That's it for now. Once again, Lucy, thanks for such a very, 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 very well life that continues so productively. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow. We'll be coming back.
Okay, so
Okay.
pack up my